All right, welcome back to the John Fredericks Show. Good to have everybody with us today. We're with Vinnie Vernuccio, and Vinnie is a Director of Labor Policy at the Mackinac Center in Michigan, right? Anybody that's ever been to Mackinac Island, right? It's named after that. Very free island. You have to get there in a ferry, no bridge, no cars. Bikes and horses, as I remember, right?
Yeah, but I tell you, it's a lot like D.C. because since there are no cars, there's a lot of horses, and you know what they leave behind.
All right, so it's got to have that pooper scooper behind you, right? Vinnie Vernuccio. Vinnie is doing a lot of work on labor, and I want to talk a little bit about, Vinnie, I want to start with the National Labor Relations Board under President Obama. They've been very aggressive. Well, one of the things that the NLRB is trying hard to do, one would call right to work bashing, or getting rid of states' right to work laws, which are in many states today, and they're doing that by, Vinnie, a variety of lawsuits. Those that are in favor of right to work have responded with what is called workers' choice. Give us the whole scoop on what's going down here, Vinnie Vernuccio, with the NLRB.
Sure. Well, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, the NLRB tried to say that workers had to pay a union if they wanted to do anything at their work site. In other words, if they wanted any services from a union, which essentially kills right to work. What they didn't say is that those workers had to accept union representation whether they wanted it or not. Now, that case really didn't go anywhere under the NLRB, but what the unions are doing now is they're suing in several different states. They're suing in Idaho, they're suing in Wisconsin, they're suing in West Virginia. Now, if you can get a mental map in your head, you see those are pretty diverse. What they're trying to do is they're trying to have all these lawsuits get them up to the Supreme Court, and if they do that, they can kill right to work for the entire country, especially if you get a Merrick Garland or someone like him appointed to the court. It could be all bets off for worker freedom. Now, the main argument is that right to work interferes with unions, with the takings clause of the U.S. and state constitution. So essentially, because unions have to represent workers that aren't paying them, it's a violation of the takings clause. They don't mention that unions like this scenario, that they like the monopoly, and they've lobbied before to make sure that they represent all workers. But anyway, at the Mackinac Center, with several other organizations such as Americans for Prosperity and others, we've come up with a concept. It's called workers' choice. Simply says that, hey, in a right-to-work state, if a union doesn't want to represent a worker not paying them, guess what? You don't have to. And that worker represents themselves. So they can negotiate for things like merit pay or, shockingly being rewarded for how hard they work instead of how long they've been on the job, like the union contracts usually provide for.
So, Vinnie, let me get this straight. Really what you're trying to do through workers' choice is allow workers the option to decide what is best for them. You're not anti-union. You're not trying to bust unions. You're not trying to do any of that. You simply want workers, if they choose to join a union, that's fine. If they choose to engage in union activities, that's fine. But those that don't want to do that, you want to protect their freedom to choose not to get involved as well. Is that my understanding?
That's exactly it, John. You hit the nail on the head. And it's more free for everybody. It gives the unions exactly what, publicly at least, they're stating, which is They don't want to represent people not paying them. It allows workers to say, you know what, this union is doing a good job. I want to keep supporting them. Yep. I'll pay them. I'll get their services. I'll get the representation. Or, they're not doing a good job. Right. I think I can do better on my own, just like the over 86% of the rest of the economy.
It's competition. It's choice. It's free market. And look, I come from a union labor background household. I was a member of a labor union a long time ago. My father spent his entire career as a union worker and activist in the Pressman Union in New York. Vinnie, we went through strikes where it put our family at risk. I mean, the strike fund was, a pittance of what you would make. And, we had union busters and scabs. I've gone through all that. My father was a union activist, but he always believed that if his union was doing the right thing, that its members would want to participate. They'd want that money coming out of their check because they believed in what they were trying to do. Once they stop doing that, then obviously you've got to fight for union membership, not just mandate it, right?
That's right. And the amazing thing is, you look at all the hyperbole against right to work. It's shocking that in right to work states, they're actually adding more new union members than non-right to work states.
That is a great point. It just happened in Virginia the other day. Same thing, where Virginia is a right to work state. A new union was just added there. I'm going to talk about that a little bit after we're off air, but you're exactly right. This is one of the untold stories that right-to-work states are having a higher percentage of adding union and union membership than non-right-to-work states.
That's right, and that's what we're all about. We're still for unions. Unions can serve a good job, but it can't be compulsory. You can't force a worker to pay. You shouldn't have to force a worker to accept that representation. Let them free. Let unions prove their worth as professional organizations. If they're doing a good job, workers will continue to join. They will continue to pay them. But if they're not, set the worker free. Set the union free from having to force representation, and set the worker free from having to accept it.
Well,
that's what workers' choice is all about.
That's the whole thing. There's no free ride and no free lunch, but in order to get people to pay you money, you have to deliver service back that people believe in. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business, just like our advertisers would stop advertising with us, Vinny, if they didn't get a result. We're with Vinnie Vernuccio. He's a lawyer. He's also the director of labor policy for the Mackinac Center in Michigan here at the Americans for Prosperity Conference. Let me just ask you this, Vinny. I want to get to the joint employer legislation. It's come up in Virginia. It's coming up in a lot of state legislators in 2017 around America. And basically, we're talking about this the other day, Vinny, what it means that if I'm a franchise owner and I have 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 employees, that I basically have to adhere to the same standards that my national franchise company would if you add in all of the franchisers and just added the whole thing up. So if you own a small business, how does this impact small business owners?
Okay, well, let's back up. There's both state and federal legislation. Both are trying to push back on something that the NLRB has decided a while back. And essentially what the NLRB decided is that I believe it was the NLRB and the Department of Labor. It's the Obama administration. What the bureaucrats have decided is that basically decades of franchise law go out the window. So if you're working at a McDonald's, right? You go to the McDonald's, you're not working for McDonald's headquarters. You're working for the mom and pop that own that one McDonald's store.
That
what they
one
do is
franchise McDonald's that has franchisee,
as opposed to McDonald's
employees.
Corporate, which is franchisor.
Right.
Exactly. Well, what the Obama administration has flipped that to is that no, you're actually working for McDonald's corporate. And the reason they're doing that is because they want to make it easier for unions to organize those companies. But in addition to doing that, they've opened up this huge can of worms, because now if you have a mom and pop shop that maybe does something wrong and it used to stop there, now it goes up to the corporation. So what we're going to see is these small business owners, people that John, from your community that own these restaurants, own these small businesses, they're going to actually be put out of business. And the worry is that instead of having a franchisor, all these companies are just going to have company stores. And it's just going to be basically that McDonald's corporate does own it and they have to micromanage everything because there's that increased liability, and that's going to hurt the community. And all of this is to make unionization easier. And they really haven't thought out what the problems and what the impact is going to be of this, because they saw, hey, we want to make unionization easier, we want more dues-paying members, and the analysis stopped there.
Exactly. So as legislators go through this fight, Vinny, in 2017, just define for us the difference between the joint employer legislation at the state level and at the federal level.
Okay, well, there's a couple different pieces at the federal level. Essentially, what First Republicans are trying to do is either defund the joint employer regulations, or simply state more clearly this is the franchisor-franchisee relationship that has been pretty much static for decades. The state level is doing the same thing, except they're doing it more on a resolution level. Hey, this is what we think works for our state. If we can't impact the federal legislation, then what we're doing is we're sending a message that this is what is best for our state, for our small businesses in our states. And like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they've been extremely good helping on this type of legislation.
Okay, we're out of time. I want to thank Vinnie Vernuccio for being with us. Hey, look, if people want more information on what we talked about today or your organization, Vinnie, where do they go?
Sure, they go to mackinac.org. And for all those listeners that are not from Michigan, it's spelled Mackinac, Mackinac.org.
All right, like Mackinac Island, right?
Exactly.
Just after that. Hey, I want to thank Vinnie Vernuccio for being with us. Thanks for shedding some light on that as we look forward to how this plays out as we go into 2017 in the Virginia State House. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're at Americans for Prosperity. Defend the Dream 16 Freedom Fest. Thanks.